Hello viewers, in this video I will talk about a text written by Sandra Gilbert and Susan Gubar. The title of the text is The Madwoman in the Attic. The full title of the book is The Madwoman in the Attic, The Woman Writer and the 19th Century Literary Imagination. This is a 1979 book by Sandra Gilbert and Susan Gubar, in which both the author had examined Victorian literature from a feminist perspective. I hope you are aware of Victorian literature, and here these two writers, Sandra Gilbert and Susan Gubar, they have tried to analyze the Victorian literature from a feminist point of view. So let's try to know more. Before that, I would like to mention one thing. My pronunciation is not so good. That's why you might not understand some word. You may not understand. And if you do not understand, please try to pause the video and try to re-listen it. Gilbert and Gubar, they draw their title from Charlotte Bronte's novel Jane Eyre. You must have heard and you must have read. Jane Eyre, it is a kind of Victorian romantic novel. It is called as romantic novel, Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, in which Rochester's previous wife or the first wife was Bertha Mason, and she was secretly locked in an attic apartment by her husband without anyone's knowledge. The few people knew about it. And this text, it specifically examines Jane Austen, Mary Shelley, Charlotte and Emily Bronte, George Eliot, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, Christina Rossetti, and Emily Dickinson's literary works in a feminist perspective. In the work, Gilbert and Gubar, they examine the notion that women writers of the 19th century were confined in their writing to make their female characters either embody the angel or the monster, a struggle which they argue stemmed from male writers' tendency to categorize female characters as either pure angelic women or rebellious, unkempt madwomen. So, in the Victorian age, many women writers wrote novel, and through the novel writing process, they have tried to represent women or the circumstance of women, the philosophy of women, and the treatment given by patriarchal society to women. But according to the writer, these two writer, Gilbert and Gubar, women writers have always knowingly or unknowingly, consciously or unconsciously, actively or passively, directly or indirectly, they were always trying to portray or trying to imitate the male writers. The male writers of Victorian age or before Victorian age, they have always tried to depict women in a very black and white mode. Either women will be very pious or women will be very evil or destructive. They have the women writers, especially the English writers, the English male writers, they represented women in a very angelic way or in a very demonic way. They either say that women characters are like angels or they are like mad. They are like devils, evils. So that difference, the writer has tried to, these two writers has tried to explore through this text. In their argument, Gilbert and Gubar, they point to Virginia Woolf, who says women writers must kill the aesthetic ideal through which they themselves have been killed into art. While it may be easy to construe that feminist writers embody the mad woman or monster, Gilbert and Gubar stress the importance of killing both figures because neither accurately represent women or women writers. So the writer of this text is saying that this both notion created by male writers or by the female writers in some extent, that women are either angel or evil. These two notions, these two images of women, it must be deleted. It must be removed from the psyche of human being or from the psyche of literary reader. These two psyche are not exemplary. These two psyche are not praiseworthy. These two psyche are some extent destructive. And instead, Gilbert and Gubar urge female writers to strive for autonomous self-definition beyond this dichotomy, which they see as imposed by a reductionist patriarchal view of women's role. And these two writers, they are also saying that within these two definition, that women are monster or women are mad women or women are angel, they are goddess. So these two, or this, within this dilemma or within these representations, women writers or the women uh, folks among themselves, they must go beyond this dichotomy. And these all are expressed, these all are brought, these all are created by the patriarchal society. And they also explore the way women were inhibited in their writing by what they call the anxiety of authorship, the lack of legitimating role models for the 19th century woman writer. One result was that what they identified as the literary palimpsest or double voice text, one with a feminist subtext hidden within a more conventional narrative, so that surface designs conceal or obscure deeper, less socially acceptable levels of meaning. So this is a book of over 700 long. This work is an early landmark in feminist literary criticism, while some have stated that it has become outdated and that the metaphoric framework outlined by Gilbert and Gubar is limiting, essentially self-referential and insufficiently aware of the varying individual circumstances. It remains a cornerstone work in their field of feminist literary work, especially in literature. It was originally published in 1979 by Yale University Press. A second edition was released in 2000 by Yale Nota Bene, and in 2022 it was reissued by Yale University Press. Now let's try to know about our writers. Sandra M. Gilbert, born on December 27, 1936. She is an American literary critic and poet who has published in the fields of feminist literary criticism, feminist theory, and psychoanalytic criticism. She is best known for her collaborative critical work with Susan Gubar, with whom she has co-authored, among others, other works like The Madwoman in the Attic in 1979, and The Madwoman in the Attic is widely recognized as a text central to second wave of feminism. She is a professor emerita of English at the University of California, Davis. She lives in Berkeley, California, and lived until 2008 in Paris. Okay. Now let's try to know about our second author. Our second author is Gubar, right? Susan D. Gubar. She was born on November 30, an American author and distinguished professor emerita of English and women's study at Indiana University. And now let's try to know a little about Charlotte Bronte, because Madwoman in the Attic, this phrase is inspired by Charlotte Bronte's famous work, Jane Eyre. Charlotte Bronte, born on 21 April 1816 and died on 31st March 1855. She was an English novelist and poet, and she is the eldest of the three Bronte sisters who survived into adulthood and whose novels became classics of English literature. Okay, and let's try to know in a very, very brief way about Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre, originally published as Jane Eyre, an autobiography, it is a novel by English writer Charlotte Bronte. It was published under her pen name Currer Bell on 19 October 1847, and the first American edition of this book was published in the following year. Okay. And this book contains elements of social criticism with a strong sense of Christian morality at its core, and it is considered by many to be ahead of its time because of Jane's individualistic character and how the novel approaches the topics of class, sexuality, religion, and feminism. It, along with Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, it is one of the most famous romance novels. Before that, since our text is based on Victorian literary works, let's try to know about Victorian literature in a very brief mode. Victorian literature, it refers to English literature during the reign of Queen Victoria, 1837 to 1901. The 19th century is considered by some to be the golden age of English literature, especially for British novels. It was in the Victorian era that the novel became the leading literary genre in English literature, and English writing from this era reflects the major transformations in most aspects of English life, from scientific, economic, and technological advances to changes in class structures and the role of religion in society. Famous novelists from this period includes Charles Dickens, William Makepeace Thackeray, and the three Bronte sisters, George Eliot, Thomas Hardy, and Rudyard Kipling. Now, let's come to the point, a very, very brief summary of the text. The Madwoman in the Attic, the woman writer and the 19th century literary imagination, co-authored by Sandra M. Gilbert and Susan Gubar, is a non-fiction scholarly text comprising 16 interconnected essays. It was first published in 1979. This lengthy volume is now widely considered a foundational text of feminist literary criticism. A second edition, it appeared in 2000, accompanied by a new introduction by the authors that offers readers insight into Gilbert and Gubar's decision to focus the work on the 19th century. The author also responds to the social changes that have taken place in the 20 years between the first and second editions. In the fall of 1973, Gilbert and Gubar, they met at the male-dominated English department at Indiana University. At this time, only 4 of India's 70 English professors were women. As born and bred New Yorkers, both women felt out of place in the Midwest, and they quickly became friends and collaborators. When the team taught an English literature seminar course on women for seniors at Indiana University, they selected the text for their course syllabus according to their own favorite women writers. And Gilbert's expertise on 20th century poetry, Gubar's training in the 18th century novel, and their shared passion for female writers of the 19th century, it enabled them to develop the lectures that became the foundation of the Madwoman in the Attic. And as the title suggests, this book it examines writing by women who lived in England and the United States during the 19th century, as well as the unique circumstances in which each woman wrote. Specifically, Gilbert and Gubar explore the lives of the literary creations of five English novelists like Jane Austen, Mary Shelley, Emily Bronte, Charlotte Bronte, and George Eliot, and the two English poets Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Christina Rossetti, and one American poet Emily Dickinson. In analyzing the similarities and specificities of these two female writers' lives and work, Gilbert and Guber highlighted the challenges women writers faced in Victorian patriarchal society, the impact family dynamics had on their writing, and the themes of imprisonment and escape in their work as reflections of the confinement women experienced in the Victorian times. Later writers like Simone de Beauvoir and Virginia Woolf also made appearance in the book. So do poets like Sylvia Plath and Anne Sexton. Male voices play a role in the book as well, and the work of Sigmund Freud, John Milton, and Harold Bloom, they all contributed to the discussion of the 19th century female writers who are the mainstays of this text. Since the content of The Madwoman in the Attic emerged from a series of university lectures for senior level English majors, the writing presumes that the reader is already familiar with the writers and the text mentioned in the book. The presumption of this prior knowledge means that Gilbert and Guber they do not provide any summary of the titles they discuss, or nor do they offer background information when mentioning contemporary writers and critics who inform their discussion, and the resulting text is rich in analytical detail and scholarly interpretations. Okay, so in 1979, we all know that this book was published, and it was considered a hallmark of second wave feminist criticism. Both the writers had proposed that all female characters in male authored novels it can be categorized as either an angel or a monster. Women in fiction were either pure and submissive or sensual, rebellious and uncontrollable, and very undesirable qualities in a Victorian daughter, mother, and wife. So, in their book, Gilbert and Guber, they discuss the angel or monster trope in novels written by women, covering the works of Jane Austen, Mary Shelley, George Eliot, Emily Dickinson, and the Brontes. They claim that 19th century female writers they carried a lot of rage and frustration about the misogynistic world they lived in and the predominantly male literary tradition they tried to enter, and that this gender-specific frustration it influenced these writers' creative output too. According to Gilbert and Guber, their anger was, their frustration was often shown through the figure of the mad woman, and they concluded by urging female writers to break out this patriarchal dichotomy and not to let themselves be limited by its impositions. We all know, but still I'm reiterating it. The title of the text is derived from Jane Eyre's Bertha Mason, who is locked away by her husband, Mr. Rochester, in the attic of Thornfield Hall. She is an ominous character full of uncontrollable passion, violence, sensuality, and madness, or almost bestial in her behavior. And in the deep shade at the further end of the room, a figure ran backwards and forwards. So this is how it was. Her character was characterized in the text. What it was, whether beast or human being, one could not at first sight tell. It grovelled seemingly on all fours. It snatched and growled like some strange wild animal, but it was covered with clothing and a quantity of dark grizzled hair, while as a mane hid its head and face. So these kind of representation were given about women by some male writers, by even female writers, knowingly or unknowingly. And Bertha, this character it acts as a foil for Jane's pure, calm, and controlled nature. However, one could argue that the lines between angel and monster are blurred, and that Bertha is not Jane's opposite but her double. The two women are more similar than initially meets the eye. Jane possesses some of Bertha's passion and rebelliousness, acting out as a child and refusing to submit to a position of inferiority to the man in her life. The Madwoman in the Attic, it was a kind of revolutionary because Gilbert and Guber they showed that literature written by women is not an anomaly, but that there is in fact a distinct female literary tradition to be found. After the book's publication, there was a new wave of appreciation for works by female writers, and consequently works that had faded away into oblivion beyond were once again being read and their significance recognized. It has since been criticized more and more in recent years, at times rightly so, but keep in mind that it was written in the 70s. At the time, this was very pertinent and germane, but there is no denying that this is a foundational work, not only for feminism, but all for the literary theory. Okay, wait. So the text, The Madwoman in the Attic, it takes its title from the iconic early Victorian novel Jane Eyre. And I have told you that in this novel, the protagonist, Rochester's wife, not protagonist, but we can say semi-protagonist, Mr. Rochester's first wife, Bertha Mason, she has gone mad and she is kept locked in the attic of their marital home. And there is other counter-narrative novel called White Sargasso Sea by by whom I have forgotten. if you read that book, there you will get the autobiography or why Bertha Mason was like that by that novelist. Okay, you read that novel, then you will get to know more. So since Bertha Mason Rochester was a wealthy Creole woman from Jamaica, she represents a sort of monstrous other who acts as a foil to the virtuous and traditionally English protagonist. And Jane Bertha is a passionate, exotic and mad traits demonized both by the novelist and the characters of the novel. In Gilbert and Gubar's survey of Victorian female novelists and the portrayal of women in Victorian literature, they considered Bertha to be a prototypical exemplar of the women as monster and used her treatment as a schematic tool to decoding the Victorian imagination of women as either angel or monsters. Among the major authors considered in the book are Jane Austen, Mary Shelley, Emily Bronte, Charlotte Bronte, and George Eliot. Gilbert and Gubar argue that within the patriarchal environment of Victorian England, women struggle to create an identity as authors. They experience what Gilbert and Gubar term the anxiety of authorship, which refers to female authors' lack of literary companionship. Many of the women writing in this era felt alone in the pursuit of their craft, almost as if they were the first to do so. As such, their work often lingers in conventional settings to achieve widespread approval. However, just beneath the surface of these seemingly mundane narratives lurks subversive feminist meaning obscured by female authors. Authors fearful of limiting their work. So that's it. Thank you so much.